everyone. Welcome to another episode of A Little Perspective, Season 2, with your hosts, Coach Ang and myself, Samyuktha. We hope everyone's having a great summer, and we're glad you're tuning in for another great interview. I will turn it over to my co host, Ange, who will introduce our guest for this afternoon, Molly Smith.
Hello, hello. We are so excited to be here. It is hard to believe that we are getting closer to being done with this season. I am super excited about today's guest. She has a phone book of things that she could talk about if we asked her to. For those of you that don't know, a phone book used to be like really thick, so it's a lot. But we have asked her to talk a little bit about herself, something she doesn't do often, but I am thrilled that she is willing to share so much of her experience and her knowledge with us. One of my best friends, Molly Smith, is here with us today. Molly, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
All right. Thank you, ladies, for having me here today. I am Molly Smith. I live in Biloxi, Mississippi, with my husband Jeremy and my our two children who are 11 and 13. Wow. Apologies, I don't have a good bio laid out because this is sort of a little bit of everything today. But I'll say I'm middle-aged and loving it. 40s have been a really beautiful stage of life. I describe myself as an advocate, an educator, and a bridge builder. And right now, professionally, I am working for a large regional bank in our training division. So I get to work with our new hires and bring them up to speed with the organization. I just like being out and about in my community and keeping my circle close and tight, but really doing all I can to build up the world around me when I'm not at work. So.
That you absolutely do, and you even do it when you are at work because you are such a leader, and I know more than most people do, of course, but super grateful that you're taking the time to come and be here with us today. Sorry. Speaking of kids, I'm not feeling super, and so my lovely oldest just brought me LaCroix. But of course, they cannot do anything quietly. So, it was worth it.
The good, bad, and the ugly of parenting. It all comes in the same 30 seconds.
Anyway, no, but truly Molly is always doing for others. Which started out, young when you joined the military, which is a service in and of itself. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your military experience and service?
Sure. I don't think I did it from a place of being like a Scrooge, but my first priority when I joined wasn't service to others. Although you're right, like volunteering has just always given me a serotonin boost. And so I was actually 19 when I enlisted in the Army Reserves. I had gone away from South Florida to college at Auburn University in Auburn, Alabama. And my parents had told me that I needed to come back home to South Florida for the summer to work. And I had been permitted to go to school out of state with the awareness that I was going to be paying the student loans that I was signing up for. So as an out-of-state student, we were going to max those out. 25 years ago, it was capped at $17,000. That doesn't seem like much nowadays, but to me, it seemed like a world of hurt. So I had 1 year down at Auburn, was going to go back, and just got this little flyer in the mail that said, join the reserves. and get $10,000 paid off towards your student loans. And in my naivete, I took the commercial hook, line, and sinker. So met with the recruiter and passed the ASVAB with flying colors. And they said, so what do you want to do in the military? I said, I don't have a car, so it's got to be close to campus. And I took a job as a 92 Alpha logistics specialist in good old Opelika, Alabama. And went back to college my sophomore year and was doing the 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks a year thing for the next 8 years. That's kind of how it got started. I just want to pay off my student loans.
I think that's probably a common story for people who join the military. And, you know, I have my opinions on that, and we can talk about that another day. But, you know, that's certainly common. Another thing that's common is coming out of the military with certain invisible disabilities, right? And so for our audience, invisible disability is one that is not as obvious. So typically mental disabilities, or just ones that aren't as obvious that they're debilitating. So I even say that while dwarfism is a visible disability, because I'm clearly 4 foot tall, it can also be at times an invisible disability because people just make assumptions about what we can do, or they don't think about the things we can't do.
Right.
So why don't you would you mind speaking a little to your invisible disabilities and conditions that you have?
No, not at all. I'm totally open to that. You know me, and I'm open book. So I ended up, well, part of my mentality was people had gone to Desert Storm, but it wasn't like the whole country went to war, right? So a lot of us who didn't have family members in the military at that point weren't so directly affected by it. It was just a thing that was on the news. So in my mind, as a rather idiot 19-year-old, I was like, we haven't had a war in forever. So no big deal. I'll just join the military. It'll be like another part-time job. Well, that was 1997, folks. And we all know what happened in 2001. So in 2001, my reserve unit overnight went from hunky-dory, no big deal, to 9/11, to, okay, we're supply, we're probably going to be some of the first people that go. Just to get logistics, you have to feed your fighters, you have to keep them in water and fuel and food and all those things. So in early December of 2001, we were one of the first reserve units to get called up. And by February, I was almost immediately on active duty. By February, I found myself in Kuwait, and was on active duty for over 180 days, which, if you're military, you know, that gets you the official veterans status as a reservist. In that year, I turned 24. Came back in 2002 after being in Kuwait, having turned 24. So I say that to say that's still incredibly young. Like, you're just figuring out the world. You definitely don't have your own head on straight. Like, the adult male brain is an adult until 26. So I was just on the cusp of adulthood. Came back, and it was incredibly stressful. I did not see combat, but in a way, the boredom of it, but just the nonstop, like, being on high alert, and there was all kinds of sirens and alarms. And something that seemed annoying at the time, and it took quite a while to realize how damaging it was. I think the male to female ratio was probably 100 to 1. So not only, like, from a war, the potential, like, you show up, get off the bus, and they're like, hey, look at those two smokestacks. that's what Saddam's going to aim for when he sends a Scud missile to hit us. That was literally said to us in the first 5 minutes pulling onto the base. So that's like, any minute that you could hear the sirens and you could have to duck and the place could be under missile attack. But this, I think as women, we're kind of socialized to the pressure of men being as aware of us as they choose to be. And I was young, I was thin, I was cute, I was attractive by all the traditional standards. And you know what? You could have been incredibly unattractive by all the traditional standards when the ratios are what they are. The unwelcome attention is unavoidable. So I literally could not go anywhere. It was a tiny base. I couldn't walk to work. I couldn't walk home. I couldn't go eat in the mess hall. I couldn't go to the little shopette they had. I couldn't go watch a movie, walk to the library, check out a DVD. I couldn't do any of those things without having a complete stranger somehow find a way to enter himself into my life. And, everything from, excuse me, do you know what time it is, was actually a manner to attempt to start a conversation with me, to like really awful, like, come ons. And, I had just come out of 4 years at a very conservative college. I didn't want anything to do with any of these soldiers. And some of them were, pretty sketchy. They were pulling folks from the front lines, like from the Kuwait-Iraq border, out of the sand for 4-day weekends every 3 months onto our base to spend a 4-day weekend. And so they were literally like in a state of, they just come out of outer space. But it took a long time for me to see the impact of that because I wasn't expecting it, I guess, from just being socialized to men can pay as much attention to you as they want to. So I, invisible illness, I came back from Kuwait and I immediately knew before I even left there that something was wrong. But in order to come off active duty, you have to be in one piece so that they'll release you from active duty. And so they take you through all these doctors, past the psychologists, and they, ask, do you have anything wrong or anything you want to report? Nope, I'm fine. Was not so fine and had massive anxiety. And it was around really strange things. I managed to get a job as a substitute teacher and working with kids, which I'd already done my whole life, and could hide it at work. It showed up as me triple checking everything. I was an incredibly great employee. But in my personal life, it took a massive toll, like small things like knocking over a glass or spilling something small, like my brain would just light up on fire from the anxiety. And it would send me into a panic and a tailspin. And I couldn't even clean it up and let it just be like a blip that you continue past. It could literally ruin my whole day. Sometimes set a trajectory for a whole week. And so my brain just lighting up on fire in panic and not being able to come down off that. We weren't using the term PTSD at that time. And when we did, I was still in the military when they started talking about PTSD more. One, the military, if you're not already trained that way when you get in, they mentally train you, you're only worth what you can accomplish. So just do. Nothing's wrong. Just get over it. But also, I knew that there was a likelihood that they could force me into some type of treatment if I admitted something was wrong, and I really didn't want to be forced into anything, or that they could boot me out. And I was still trying to build a career, and that money from being in the reserves was part of my survival at that point. So there were a lot of incentives to not talk about the things that were wrong. So I went, it ended up being 10 years before I was correctly diagnosed with PTSD. In the meantime, I had 2 children towards the end of that, 17 months apart. And when my youngest was about a year old, she went through this phase where she was not really sleeping well at night, which meant I was up every night with her. And I started to get into a phase of sleep deprivation. And the PTSD went from just being an anxiety disorder to it had a flare, as some of us might call it. So hypervigilance is a part of PTSD, and my PTSD went into massive hypervigilance. And I try to explain that to people. Like, you've seen castles, you see that there is a high place for soldiers to stand to be on the lookout from the enemy. And they're all around the city protecting people. They have a purpose, they're on duty, they change the shift, they go off duty. Hypervigilance is like you are on duty and you are not coming off, and the enemy is coming, and you know they're coming, and it's just you and only you, and you have to protect everyone all the time. And so the mind is just as if that was your job. Like, your life, the world, your family, everything depends on that. Your mind is just in this electrified state. It makes you very jumpy, exhausted, short-tempered, tired, just a lot of not great personality traits. But then also I was having some physical symptoms that had shown up previously really set in. I started having migraines when I was stationed in Kuwait. And a couple years after having the kids, they went from occasional to 2 or more a month. And I also was experiencing something my doctors described as fibromyalgia-like symptoms. I was just having pain everywhere all the time. So something about my body's perception of pain was really off. I would wake up some days and I would feel so achy, like you were coming down with the flu. And I was like, is this something I should just push through, or do I need to take it easy today? I didn't know if it was immune system or, I was going crazy or what was really going on. But yeah, it was, I want to say, like the fall of 2011, where a lot of it really came to a head. I'd been several months into sleep deprivation, did not have a PTSD diagnosis, didn't know how to describe what was going on, was actually very depressed, but the depression I was experiencing wasn't like anything I'd ever seen on a commercial, where they like have that cloud and the raindrops and they're blue. Like, I wasn't teary. And I remember going upstairs to take a bath. Someone else was taking care of the kids, going upstairs to take a bath, and I fill the bathtub and I go and sit down in the tub. And I thought, I could go under and never come back up again and not have to feel this pain. It was a physical battle, and it was so much of a mental battle, and nobody saw any of it. The first doctor I saw told me, you need to go to church more. I was at church like 3 to 5 times a week. I volunteered there a ton and was a stay-at-home mom. I needed to have more sex. Yes. And what was his third tidbit of wisdom? I'm not even sure I can remember it. And I was like, good God, man, just give me a prescription and I'm never coming back to see you again. I had no clue where to go based on what I was feeling. And, he obviously wasn't it, and he wasn't pointing me in the right direction. So it was
Was
another.
he a military doctor?
No, he was just a general practitioner in the
Oh,
community
wow.
that after I had this, basically what is the precursor to suicidal ideation, I went to my then spouse and said, something just happened and I need some help. And so he said, let's call the doctor and make an appointment and start there. And that was the advice I got, or that was the information that was passed on. So it was thankfully through another female friend who had been struggling with depression, who recommended both her therapist and her doctor, and said that her doctor, like would ask her, what's your therapist saying? Or do I need to call the therapist? And actually was working with her. And it was that therapist who, when she said, so tell me what you're feeling, like she's digging in the conversation. And I said, it feels like I've been sliced all over with razor blades and someone is pouring alcohol on me. That's what I feel like at any given time for no particular reason. I just always feel like that if I'm awake. And she said, that is depression. And I said, okay, I'm depressed. And I went in to the doctor then after that diagnosis. She said, go in, tell the doctor about your military background, tell her that I have used the term depression to describe what you're dealing with, and see what she says next. So she was the one, after hearing about the hypervigilance and the massive sleep disturbances and the depression, that said, you have PTSD. And so then that was another step in the path of trying to find a way to like live a life that felt meaningful to me, because then I was literally just scraping by every day with 2 young kids. I'd spent most of my life prior to that not knowing much other than I definitely wanted to be a mom. Like I wanted to make an impact in the world and leave the world a better place than I found it. But I knew I wanted to be a mom. And every day I was with my kids, I was miserable. And so the fact that there was a potential to feel differently was like a breath of relief. I'm not a total failure. This thing I wanted my whole life wasn't a ruse. And it was actually about 2.5 years later that I finally started a medicine that made a huge difference in my quality of life. I've now been on that medication 8 years.
How did your family and friends respond to your initial diagnosis? Because, it's more commonly talked about now, but it certainly wasn't then.
Yeah.
And again, because it's such an invisible disability, how did they respond to that?
I think in some ways, because it was gradual along with having 2 kids, like a lot of my then friends also had young kids and were primarily at home. And so we were all kind of like always thin emotionally, like tired and didn't get enough interaction with other adults. And so I didn't have a language for it. I think my birth family was very much of the old school. Like my dad didn't want to hear about it. I think personally, like it triggered feelings of shame in him and being a failure as a parent. And so he would either mock me or like sarcastically try and shut me up. My mom was just like, I have nothing like that fits within my life experiences. I don't know how to help you. Like, how do we get you help? But I had already become like a trained social scientist at that point through graduate school. And so I just started digging into research and all the things that weren't there. I just started looking for all kinds of connections. With young kids, I couldn't see a therapist as much as I would have liked to. And so I just started finding all the books and as much as I could, just doing the work my own. Um, and, I honestly don't know today what the PTSD would look like if I wasn't on this medication. I have memories of sadness type depression, extreme loneliness from probably as young as 8. So
Can you
I don't
talk
know.
more? Can you talk more about the medication and how
Oh,
it
yeah,
has like helped you and like how it
sure,
has helped you do better in
sure.
managing the PTSD?
Yeah, so the PTSD, I actually ended up going, I was already on the medication for a couple years, and I ended up going through immersion therapy and doing a lot of work around breath work and teaching the body how to relax. And it was through a lot of that the PTSD, like, and it was a very spiritual experience. I felt like a lot of the physical shackles of the PTSD were broken off of me. Um, so the PTSD in a lot of ways was rooted to a sexual assault when I was 17 that I did not recognize at that point as assault and never spoke to anyone about until it came up in the immersion therapy when I was, I think, 38 or 39. But as far as the migraines, the depression, the body pain, I'm on an SNRI, which is an antidepressant classed medication. It's called Cymbalta. It's very common prescription for people with fibro, um, and it changes how the body's pain receptors respond. As it's an antidepressant, it also helps your body with all those chemicals that um, are out of whack when you do have depression. So the anxiety that sets off, you know, there's been a lot of personal work. I'm not getting triggered by things and teaching my body how to relax, but there's also not that physical just flare as I describe it. It's kind of like you see these fireworks, you light the bottom and they just start. You couldn't stop the thing if you wanted to, right? Like you bury it in sand, it's still shooting fire out of it. I don't experience that anymore. I remember less than 2 months after starting the medicine for the first time, we went out to the park. My kids were little. I want to say like 2 and 4. And if we would go to the park, their father would goof around with them, and I'd kind of walk behind, try and keep up, but just, kind of be in my own cloud of discomfort. And I said something funny to them and tickled one of them and did a really loud, like, hoot laughter and like took off running away from them and said, "You can't catch me." And the poor man, like, we're um, divorced now, but I still remember the poor man turning around and like had no idea what, because he was hearing these things he wasn't used to hearing, and like turning around with this look on his face, like, what is happening? And here I am laughing and smiling and like jogging. And he's like, "Who are you? What is happening?" And I was like, "I don't know." That was probably the first time I remember laughing in a couple years. Like I was just in so much physical pain all the time. There was no capacity for
Wow.
it. Um, so, I would wake up and prior to the medication and not know on any given day how much ability I was going to have. Was I going to be able to like get right out of bed, like wake up the kids, make some kind of breakfast, have the energy to go to the park and make the doctor's appointment and get home and they take naps or lunch or whatever? Or was it going to be like, we cancel everything and I just pour some bowls of cereal and we watch cartoons until mommy can stand up and keep going again? So there's been a much more like physical equilibrium. I still have to respect that my body is not a go 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 machine, and I keep margin and I make less commitments than someone who would describe themselves at peak health probably would. Um, but there's a constancy, and with respecting my limitations, I feel like I've been able to create a life that I believe is beautiful.
So I know you are a go-getter, but you do maintain that balance well. Do you struggle to do you have FOMO? Do you struggle to sit down? Did you before? Have you learned how to?
Oh
Because
yeah, it was a process of years. Like, so I went from finishing up the military, right? Like nothing in the military teaches you how to rest, like genuine rest, rejuvenation. It doesn't teach you how to relax. It teaches you to work hard and play hard. So a lot of times that's like, for people, it's boozing up and then being in recovery the next day. So that's your recover day, is your hangover to go right back to work. So I kind of went from that. I slammed myself through graduate school. I was working 40 hours a week, plus doing research, plus going to classes, like, quintessential type A. And then it was like I hit the brick wall in some ways. So yeah, it was a process. There was a book by a woman named Anne Voskamp. One of her first books, or her first book, called 1000 Gifts. And it was life-changing for me in a way that I kind of carried with me, almost like this: all these things that are happening to me, I must deserve it. Like this body limitation, this wasn't meant for me. This must be some cosmic punishment for some choices I made. And she opens her book talking about watching as a 4-year-old her 1 or 2-year-old sister get run over in her family driveway. And the book is completely about gratitude. And I didn't laugh because it was funny. I laughed because of the juxtaposition. Sorry. So if she can find a way to build a life with that being her earliest memory, the death of her little sister right in front of her, I came away from the book with such a practice of gratitude, like just with every breath, day in, day out, inhale, exhale. And the phrase, all is grace in the hands of God. So anything that comes my way isn't punishment, it's grace. And in the moment, it might not feel like or look like grace, but it is grace. And so, yeah, I'm kind of a quintessential, I would never choose this for myself. But no, I have no fear of missing out. Like, I have a garden. I love my garden. I built me, sorry. The years of Mississippi and Alabama slip in sometimes. We built a fire pit out back. My husband's manual labor and my do this. I have just really, really come to treasure a life of peace. And if that means I'm the only one in the space because there's nobody else that's asking to enter is coming from a place of peace, then so be it. Like, I am so comfortable with myself, and that was not me naturally. I had to be at every event. I had to be, like leading the charge. Um, and so I think I still live into my gifts, but in a very different way, giving my physical limitations and what I've learned. So that looks like, you know, I get some spark of idea or talking to somebody else and we come up with this great thing. And I'm very clear with the boundaries of I can do this and I will do this and I won't do the rest of it. You're going to have to find somebody else. A lot of using my brain and planning, using email, texting, those kind of things, and saying, I can be there and give direction for setup, but my body can't do that labor. Like, you don't know how many partially dislocated shoulders it took for me to finally say, I am not moving again. I can pay someone or family can volunteer and I will direct and label and organize the heck out of it, but I'm not doing the actual physical labor. And it's just been a process of learning, of respect for my body, having the gratitude to say, or the ability to say with gratitude, I'm glad for what it can do, and I'm not going to function out of place of I wish it could. Like, it doesn't. So
How do you balance that with parenting? Because granted, the kids are a little older now and they're self-sufficient. If you take a nap, they're not going to set the house on fire necessarily. But, there was a time when they weren't, because you've been dealing with this for a while. So as a parent, how do you balance, and the parent of a the primary parent, because your husband was deployed a good bit, or overseas or
yeah,
whatever.
I was the solo parent for a lot of
Thank you.
years.
That's the word I'm looking for.
Um,
So how do
yeah.
you manage all of
Again, creating a rhythm that doesn't say yes to things, being good with being at home. There are times like post COVID where I've told my son, I'm sorry that I don't have the physical energy to get you to every single thing you'd like to do. And I don't know why God made you super high energy and gave you a parent that does not have that energy capacity. But I literally can't do it. And if I did find a way to do it, I would be stealing from something else. Like, I know the cost to going beyond my physical capacity is relational. Because when my body gets short, my spirit gets short, I get short tempered, all the things I now physically can't do, even what I should be able to do in my limited body, those get passed on to other people. My attitude gets wrecked. And so I have the ability to say, like, from an honest place, I really am doing my best. If this is a God thing, he's going to make a way for it. And our relationship has always been number one for me. Like, my priority as a parent is to raise them to be the healthiest, wholest human beings that they can, and for us to have the healthiest, wholest relationship with each other as we can. And that doesn't rely on activities, right? That could be, being at home, doing a puzzle or playing Uno or Legos when they were little. When they were tiny, it was literally like putting them in bed and taking a nap. They'd take a nap and I'd take a nap, and I would get my own pillow and I would lay in the doorway so that when they woke up, I woke up. Like, they would, they'd need to do something physical and I didn't have the capacity. I'd put them in the bathtub and I would just sit there and just kind of like put my head on my knee, and they'd play in the water until they were worn out and sick of it, which sometimes was an hour. They'd be good and pruny. Just finding ways, even with food, that prior to everything coming to a head, I wanted to cook everything from scratch. I wanted zero preservatives in the house, as much meat free and organic as possible. And it was like, that could actually be the death of me. So that can't be genuine health given my limitations to try and keep up with all that. And so I think focusing on the big picture goals and working within the reality of what I do and don't have, and just figuring out how to make it work, just to keep one foot in front of the other.
I think that you have really shown me how to live authentically and not be concerned about, how it's taken or how it's received. And so with that, what you just said about like the organic and all that, because I'm a pretty healthy minded person, but I have finally just thrown in the towel and have not completely, but pick and choose, right? Like I choose my battles when it comes to that. And that has made such a difference in just me being a single mom of 3, much less, having the other conditions that, that came with what, you were struggling with. So I wanted to repeat that just because I feel like there's probably moms out there that need to hear that and feel like they got permission to just make the mac and cheese from Kraft and don't feel like you have to make a 5-star dinner. If fed is fed, and if it means that your kids need to put ketchup on their chicken to eat it, then they still ate some protein, right? So
yeah, I mean, I've definitely, like, if there's a mental battle, I promise you I have battled it. Like, so one of the things I learned when doing my research about PTSD after my diagnosis, and Lord, I hope my parents, if they ever see this, that they just have a cloud of grace upon them, is that those of us who develop chronic PTSD, which means the effect of the trauma goes beyond a year or two, upwards of 95% of them, when asked, how would you describe your childhood, used words that were negative. So I was in that camp. My memories of childhood involve a lot of verbal abuse. Now, it's nothing that CPS would have come for, right? There was nary a hand laid on me, and upper middle class, everything I ever needed and wanted was provided. But I am an empath. I feel extremely deeply. And there was language programmed into me from it being said so much in my childhood. So there were a ton of battles that I had to come through that, it would take months for us to even touch on them. But the comparisons, the what of other people think, like that was part of my boundaries journey. Like I have to be true to who I am, to what I'm called to do, what my capacity and gifts are, like the calling I know for my life. And I've got to put the rest of it away. So it was pretty easy. Like I've always been that person who's just like who they are. Like it just comes out of my mouth. Like I have a hard time with pretense. So setting aside like the Joneses and what the neighbors are doing, or the people on Facebook, I'm like, delete, block, and then when it comes to like family members having comments or people close to you or friends who make you feel like you should be all those things, those were harder journeys. But I just had to get crystal clear about who I am. I said I'm now divorced to the father of my children. I can promise you that There was a lot in that journey, going from, married for 15 years. There was a lot of me growing to a place where I said no more. And so some of that really, like all is grace, some of that really ugly stuff that happened in that relationship got me to the place where I can say, like, when I am dead and gone, what do I want people to say about me? And when my kids like have a hard time with the choices I make, we end up getting back to that conversation. Look, I can only be me. And I have to think about on the regular, when I get to the end of this life, whether it be tomorrow or 50 years from now, what have I done with what I've been given? What do I want people to say in my absence? Do I want them to say fake things that they never would have said when I was alive because I was so annoying or so critical or so mean? Do I want them to say good riddance because she was just a pain in the bleepity bleep? No. My answer to that question is I want the people I loved to say she loved us and she loved us really well. And
that's all that matters.
So,
right?
yeah,
That's
so
the bottom line.
yeah, so I've just had to get really crystal clear on what that looks like for my life and just let the rest of it go away. And I can tell you, when you get flatlined by invisible illness, when just getting yourself out of bed becomes a struggle, when just putting the food in your body and the keeping your kids alive, like the basics, is like, that was a really good day. Like, everybody got clothes on when we left the house. Like, they were properly clothed for the occasion. They had a meal. Like, they have been bathed in an appropriate amount of time. You have a lot of downtime. Like, you're in your head a lot. And so I had to get really comfortable with what was inside my skull, and a lot of time to think. So yeah, just you get clarity when the ugly comes, and it just stays, and you have to make a path forward. So
Yeah, thank you. Well, that was so moving. That was incredibly like vulnerable and powerful of you to just like really go into your journey and your story, and um for sharing all of that. We're actually reaching the end of our interview recording, so I wanted to see if you had any final words that you'd like to share with our viewers, especially about PTSD and just like the misconceptions behind it, because like the first doctor that you saw, he just said the solution is go to church or have
yeah.
more sex. So, and I'm sure that is still something that is not fully understood in this world. So anything you'd like for the viewers to know?
I just think, regardless of what you're struggling through, if you're saying something's not right, I don't know what's going on in my head, but just something is not the way it should be. Or if you're watching a family member that you love and you're like, this is not them, something is off, um, find a professional. And if the first one gives you an awful answer, keep looking. I know the season of just picking up the phone and dialing and asking for an appointment sends you into a 45-minute like panic attack. Like, I've lived through not being able to make a doctor's appointment, not because my schedule was too full, but they were going to ask me questions and I was going to have to come up with answers just on the phone, just to schedule an appointment. But don't isolate yourself. If the first professional can't help you, that's on them. Find another one. Please don't give up. Don't give up on your family members. If they need help, there are good professionals out there. If you're a veteran, go see the VA, make use of what benefits you can, but don't let the lies, whether they're internal or external, don't let the shame dictate your life, the choices you make. You deserve a life that you can be proud of, that you find beautiful, that brings you joy, that is filled with peace. And I just hope that you keep moving towards that, and keep growing into that, regardless of where you are today.
Absolutely. All of that. That's so beautiful. And you have shared so much with us, Molly, so much really great information, really good nuggets. And that last part, we want you here. We want you to live your best life. And so find help, find someone to help you find help. Don't let shame keep you from asking someone to make a phone call with you or for you.
I've made that offer a lot of times since.
I mean, I've had to have people do that with me because I've put in, and I don't have PTSD, but my anxiety sometimes will just, and I need to do something. I mean, thank God so much is online now. If I had to make phone calls like all the time, I honestly don't know how I would do it because it's just like such a thing. But when that thing is your life, then asking a friend to either help you make the call or sit with you while you make the call is.
I mean, I've made calls for friends from other cities, like give me your zip code, and looked up for professionals, and I'm like, okay, I'm calling this person. Do you feel up to calling this doctor? Or and just help move. Sometimes all it takes is that one little piece, like that there's someone else who is speaking into me, I'm not out of my mind. Or just that one little push of energy, being able to move in the right direction, like that little spark of hope. Like, it's not always going to be this way. It can get better. I'm not stuck.
It's not forever.
So there's a there's a phrase that's a combination of different things you might hear, but I like to remind, especially women, we need this message a lot. You're always enough, and you're never too much. Right? Like we get the message from society like, that you're lacking, or you're too much. You want too much, like this, that,
or
too
both.
big.
Like you're both.
And simultaneously, like yes, I was simultaneously getting that from no names to be named, but a particular gaslighter in my previous years, like within the same breath. And I whether it is a mental illness, whether it is a physical health struggle, whether it's visible or invisible, you have every right to a beautiful life. Like, every person has the rights to that. And so, don't let other people convince you like you're stuck. You have this diagnosis, or you have this brokenness, and that's just where you're stuck. Like, there are people out here who are taking their limitations and are saying, I can still build a life of purpose and meaning and beauty and peace and joy, regardless of the circumstances.
Yes, absolutely. Well, with that, we will wrap it up because I don't think we can get much better. So thank you so much, Molly, for recording this again.
It was an honor. Thank you.
And thank you, of course, Samyuktha, for always being my incredible co-host and partner.
Yes.
We are so grateful to have all of you watching and listening, and we hope that you guys got something out of this and have really taken some notes for yourself. And we did talk about women a lot because we are women and we are all part of Team Too Much. But it also applies to the men's as well. And so don't let us using female verbiage scare you away. It all applies. You are all enough. We love all of you, and we hope that you have the best day. Bye, y'all.
Thanks, everyone.